If you like what you're hearing, put your money where your media is by subscribing to independent podcasts like this one. Go to lauraflanders.org/membership. And thanks. Hi, I'm Laura Flanders, and this is The Laura Flanders Show, the TV and radio program that seeks to raise radical spirits by interviewing forward-thinking people with real models of shifting power from the worlds of arts, entrepreneurship, politics, and activism. Trans voices and transformation. This week on the show, using independent media to make connections. I interview Imara Jones in a conversation about her TV work and trans representation and resistance in the age of Trump. And while we're talking about transformation, my commentary this week's on what's changed and what hasn't in the decade since the financial crash. The end of capitalism. Is it still harder to imagine than the end of the world? That's coming up on The Laura Flanders Show, the place where the people who say it can't be done take a back seat to the people who are doing it. Welcome.
The pop culture moment of the week came when the chief knowledge officer of CrossFit, Russell Berger, wrote in a tweet, "Don't these people know Twitter is dangerous by now? That LGBTQIA pride is, quote, a sin, close quote, showing indeed that a little knowledge is a dangerous thing." Now, apparently Berger knew that it was Pride Month, and he knew that CrossFit in Indianapolis, in another head-scratching moment, had chosen to cancel a Pride event. But what he did know is that for many gay people, CrossFit is like church, with shouting, testifying, and running in the aisles. And perhaps as important from a corporate perspective is that CrossFitters are wealthy, earning on average $150,000 a year. Well, whatever he forgot, the company's CEO told him to shut the, quote, F up, close quote, and to hide out for real. He said both of those things, which became easy to do because, well, Berger was fired. All this goes to show you that you never get in between a chief executive and his money.
That was a clip from The Last Sip with Imara Jones. The Last Sip is a weekly show that premiered on Free Speech TV earlier this year. It features discussions on politics, culture, and the hot topics of the day. And as its audience, it targets historically marginalized communities and brings those voices to the fore on subjects such as diversity in technology, trans rights, or one of the hottest shows of the summer, Pose. On top of that, Imara Jones has another show out now, a web docuseries that we'll also be hearing more about. Imara, thanks for joining us. Glad to have you.
Thank you for having me.
I was trying to remember when was the first time we met or were on a show together. I couldn't actually remember, but I feel like we've crossed paths for a long time.
Indeed. Most recently, and at conferences as well. Yeah. So, yeah.
And now we're both on Free Speech TV.
There you go.
Among other places. So tell us a little bit about The Last Sip. What are you sipping for a start?
We are sipping information from the front lines of social change. We believe that the communities that are, as you say, the most historically marginalized are actually where the solutions to our most pressing problems are coming from, because they're the people that are most invested in finding solutions, right? The people that are most impacted are the most invested in finding new solutions. But in many ways, those are the voices that, as you know, are not uplifted or not brought forward in media, and particularly those that are at the intersection of race, class, also gender, as well as sexual orientation and identity, that all of those things sort of create new points of view for us to look at and think about in our society. And as we become more diverse, it is even more the case.
Yeah, I always say the people with the front line seat on what is happening are the ones who can bring us the news.
That's right.
People who are at the cutting edge are getting cut, but they're also getting smart.
That's exactly
about
right.
What's happening. So give us some examples of some of the people you've had on, some of the shows you're excited about.
One of the shows that I think stands out for me the most is when we had almost an entire show that was dedicated to sexual assault amongst African-American women and girls. And we spoke about it from a historical point of view. We spoke about it from a contemporary culture point of view. There was one person that we had on who believes, Trevor Lindsay, a professor, who wrote an entire article for Vox about how Black women's activism actually helped to set up the prosecution of Bill Cosby. So we had her on, and that was very interesting. And then also Aisha Shahida Simmons, who is a well-known restorative justice voice in terms of sexual assault. And it was the first time that I had ever seen a program on television, on news, devoted to that subject, and where everyone speaking about it were all African-American women. And the conversation was broad, bringing into that not only cis women, but also trans women, and a larger discussion about the role of men of all backgrounds in that. And so that was a program that stands out for me. There are other segments that stand out for me. One of them, as you mentioned, was one that we did on the way in which an African-American woman-led VR team here in New York is using VR technology as a way to combat the impact of racism by embedding women in an all African-American environment to help counteract the impact of PTSD and other things that are caused by racism, which was a total innovative point of view. So those are some of the standouts for me.
Yeah, and you're doing this new docuseries now, Translash. Great title. What do we see in Translash?
One of the things that interests me about Translash and about this particular moment is that we're at a moment of social backlash. Which is undeniable in almost every single way. But at the same time, there's been a dramatic expansion of the number of people who are transitioning, even in the last 2 years.
Wow, is that documented? Not just that we're knowing more people, it's that it's happening more.
It's happening. It's happening more. The number of patients at various LGBTQ clinics. So, for instance, at Callan Lord here in New York, the single largest, fastest category of patients they have are trans patients. And it's increased the overall number of patients they have by 25%.
Which is not to say that it's suddenly gotten easier or more comfortable to be a trans person in America.
No. And so one of the things that my own process of transitioning sparked in me was, what's this link between a backlash and leaning forward, right? And what does that say about the moment that we're in? And I have to say that Donald Trump's election was a spur in me to accelerate my process, I have to say. And I found in talking to other people that I'm not alone in that. And so one of the things that I think is happening is one of the core rationales, I believe, from the right is that they want to take the country back to a time when essentially they were dominant, right? And felt the most comfortable, even though objectively the country wasn't better off, but they felt better, right? And the idea is that if they undermine the pillars of support for all of the people that have been able to come to the fore since 1965, particularly, they are very, very focused on 1965, because that's the year of immigration change and also the Voting Rights Act. It was after the Civil Rights Act. They're very focused on that. That somehow that the country will become whiter, more male, more patriarchal, and more Christian and more stable from their point of view. But one of the things I think that is indicative of where we might be going is this moment, this tension that I mentioned, where actually, honestly, as they continue to push back and try to turn the clock back, that actually more people who they want to go away are going to rise up even more.
More is even like as an act of resistance.
That's exactly right. And so what they're actually doing is not setting the country on a more stable path from their point of view. They're actually putting the country on a more unstable path. That what we're doing is setting up clashes. We're not actually going to end them. And that's interesting. And I want to talk to people about why they decided to transition now. We're going to be speaking to leaders of various organizations, cast members from Pose, and there's also another hot show that focuses on trans people called My House on Viceland, those cast members, and then also some aspects of my own medical transition this summer. So there's a lot to pack in those episodes, but it's that essential tension of the pushback and the pushback, where that leads us.
I'm Laura, and this is the Laura Flanders Show. My guest is Imara Jones, former economics contributor and pundit at the online outlet Color Lines. Now she's the creator and co-host of The Last Sip, airing on Free Speech TV, in just the way this show does. She's just launched a docu-series online called Translash, examining what it's like to transition genders at a time of social backlash. That very backlash has backfired, she says, as more people are transitioning than ever. More to come.
Everything. Everything is new. everything. Everything is new. And I cried everything. Everything is new. I cried everything. Everything is new.
That was Everything is New by Anthony and the Johnsons, now known as Anoni, from the film Turning, created in collaboration with the performance artist Charles Atlas. This is the Laura Flanders Show. Please take a moment to support our coverage of people shifting power and join the power shift yourself by becoming a subscriber at www.lauraflanders.org. I'm also making a special ask today that you subscribe to this podcast and review us wherever it is you get your podcasts. Numbers and ratings matter, much as we wish they didn't. Trust me, they do. And we rely on you to subscribe and review. So will you do it? At our website, you can get a sneak peek of the first episode of Translash, produced and hosted by my guest today, Imara Jones. While the media shed more positive light on trans people, the visibility has provoked a predictable reaction in the world of politics. It's coming from the far right or the dark media, says Imara. So what to do? And then I want to talk to you about media, because I was struck this summer to see, on the front page of the New York Times at some point, a fairly positive story about transmigration and the challenges that trans people have at the border. And I thought to myself, well, that story wouldn't have appeared. I mean, I can't imagine it ever appearing before now. I'm sure there's problems with the reporting, but there is more reporting, and it's not all terrible. With respect to the media, what do you think's changing? Are you seeing positive change, or just greater number of stories? What?
Well, I think that there is this, as trans becomes more visible, there's more coverage,
right?
And it rises in people's consciousness, which is what happens in moments like this. I think that with more coverage, some of the coverage is going to be good and some of the coverage is going to be bad, but there actually is just more of it, right? And I think that the people who do write about trans issues do care about it, right? It doesn't seem like editors are assigning them to people that don't care. Oh, go just cover the story. But at the same time, there's that what's happening in mainstream sources and sort of mainstream center, left of center. So, for instance, The Atlantic has a huge devoted on trans issues. So there's a lot of focus on that.
But are trans people writing? Are trans people talking?
No. So there are a couple of issues. Not only are trans people not writing and talking, which is part of the rationale for my show, but it's also the case that there's also this huge underground, equally negative, equally disgusting churn in right-wing media that's anti-trans. And that is, so I was recently at a conference of the NEA that focused on social justice. And one of the things that I heard over and over not only
Education Association.
National Education Association, not only on trans issues, but in general, there's this emerging conversation on the right that ethnic studies, quote, transgenderism is what they call it, is a conspiracy that's being put forth by Jews in the media to undermine white Christian America.
And
I heard it
agenda kind of thing.
Right, but I heard it from several different places. I heard it in a Black Lives Matter conference. I heard it in a transgender conversation. So there's also this equal churn, and that dark media, as we saw from the last election, has just as much impact as what's happening in the broader press. So I think that there's a countervalence even as things continue to improve with the deficiencies that you spoke about.
So talk about your journey a little bit, not just the transition, but your transition from working in the Clinton administration, for example, I mean, inside a belly of a beast,
Yes.
to this kind of independent, I think very brave production making, in making media yourself, making your own voice heard.
Yeah. Well, you have to have a touch of insanity. As you know, it's not an easy path. I think that...
Because you were in the communications office.
No, I worked on trade.
Oh, you did?
I worked on trade and communications.
Oh, there you go.
In the last 2 years of the administration. Yeah, I think that one of the things that I've always held in myself is that I believe that we have a responsibility to make things better.
Yeah.
And I think that we then have to ask ourselves objectively what makes things better.
Yeah.
And the more experience you get, the more you learn what makes things better. And I think that's essentially been on my journey. That's been what my journey is, that essentially, because one of the things is I was trained as an economist. You know, I went to the London School of Economics. That's where my degree is from. There's certain things that you're trained as an economist that are just orthodoxy. Economic growth is going to benefit the most number of people. It's lifted the most number of people out of poverty, et cetera. And we are trained in orthodoxy, quite frankly, without question. And I think that one of the things that living does and life does, and experience and seeing the world, is that you get to test those early ideas against the actual realities. And I think that there are some severe deficiencies in the way that our society works, and that if you actually want society to work better for people, we have to have radical change.
So I'm going to ask you to do something maybe makes you uncomfortable, but talk a little bit about somebody like me. I mean, here, I've been in this business a long time. I think I know there are things that I still don't get about trans rights, about a trans vision of the world, around trans expertise. Even as we cover alternatives, and you know, the tag of our show is the place where the people who say it can't be done take a back seat to the people who are doing it. What does somebody even like me need to perhaps see that I'm not seeing about the importance of looking at the trans struggle and trans rights?
I think trans is essential in a lot of different ways. I was actually speaking to someone who's been in women's movement and feminist movement recently about this long conversation. And there cannot be an end to patriarchy without an embracing of trans rights. It's fundamentally impossible. And to the degree that we believe that patriarchy is a fundamental pillar on which injustice is built in our society, that means that that pillar can't be undone. Because as long as we have gender essentialism, as long as we think in binary ways, we're going to get caught in the same constant trap. And it's one of the reasons why we haven't made as much progress as we think we should have made on feminism and on women's rights. That's because misogyny and patriarchy are essentially still there, and they work in the same ways around these issues. And so what the trans perspective does is that it fundamentally undermines that. It takes the core argument of biological determinism out of the conversation of gender, which then undermines patriarchy. So if me being born this way doesn't mean that I automatically have this status in society, that means that those two things are totally separate, which then drives a completely different conversation. And so what trans is about the ability to see and to reimagine our society in broad ways that can lead towards justice and humanity and put human beings at the center of our systems rather than orthodoxy.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder where we took a weird turn in the sense that when I was coming up, which you would say I sort of probably got my feminism in the 70s and early 80s, I was a queer left socialist feminist. And I thought that was sort of our vision, was to destabilize the binaries and to undermine capitalist transactional relationships and instead have transformational, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And then somehow it all became about defending this law, defending this gain, and let's not talk about anything else while we're under attack.
Right. I mean, I think that one of the things that is essential for us to understand is that even if we don't like the system, we've been raised in the system, right? A huge part of the system is didactic thinking. So even one thing against it's either or. So for instance, if you are a socialist feminist and you're in a meeting with men and women who are also socialist, and then there's a conversation about, well, we need to fight for worker cooperatives.
Right.
And then someone raises their hand and says, well, what about the role of women in cooperatives? Because unless we have women leaders. And then they go, well, we can't do that because we can only do one thing at a time. Everyone's been raised in this binary system, right, of thinking and of forcing you to make choice. And also the other thing that people don't think about is the way in which subconsciously everyone has absorbed all of the isms.
Yeah.
So one of the things, for instance, that patriarchy does really well is that it gets women to question ourselves, right, fundamentally, right? Just automatically, when you think you know the right answer, you think about it twice, and men don't do that, right? Like
I've noticed.
Right? There's never that consideration. So what happens if someone in this proverbial meeting raises a doubt, then you begin to doubt yourself. And it's a way in which you then are feeding into patriarchy in a way that you don't even think.
Yeah. So it's fascinating and super exciting, and I wish we had more time, because it also seems like at a moment where technology is also driving us towards a binary kind of, are you a 1 or a 0? Is it a thumbs up or a thumbs down? Are you a friend or a not friend? What is your relationship? The trans movement is saying, no. Mutability is all. And in fact, trans is something we all need to embrace in terms of a sense of
Absolutely.
Possibility.
Absolutely.
And mutability in a very rigid age.
Exactly. One thing on that, though, one of the key areas of competition between the United States and China with respect to computing and technology is actually quantum computing, which takes you out of zeros and ones. So we may actually be moving to a world within our lifetimes where the binary, even within that, loses its power, which leads to entirely different possibilities, frightening possibilities for computing. But it means that we are living in a world in so many ways in which we're trying to impose a binary on a planet and a place that's resisting it.
Yeah. Quantum engineering. I want to know more about it.
Yeah.
I hope I found out more on your show. All right, so final questions to people, or final comments to people who want to join you and find you in the media, but also participate in this conversation more. What can they do? Where can they go?
The good thing about technology is social media. So almost everything is Imara Jones. So if you type in my name on any social media platform, it's a very easy way to follow me. And then for The Last Sip, if you just go to Google and type in The Last Sip, it comes right up.
All right. Congratulations, Imara.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Soon.
See you soon.
Imara Jones, everybody. You're watching The Laura Flanders Show. That's Imara Jones, trans activist and creator of The Last Sip, a weekly news show airing on Free Speech TV, where you can also watch this program every week. Check out our website for the full show, the video version, and a peek at Translash. That's on Free Speech TV or at www.lauraflanders.org. Next, my weekly commentary, The F Word. On the 10th anniversary of the collapse of Lehman Brothers, all sorts of post-mortems are being written about what went wrong in 2008. The thing is, post-mortems suggest that something died, and in this case, while one of the nation's largest investment firms, Lehman, is no more, the system it came to symbolize is still with us. 10 years on, the stock market teeters from height to height, and developers keep building houses for gazillionaires. Low-income people keep taking on high-income debt, and wages remain too low for them to do otherwise if they want to keep their cars, their health care, or their kids in college. The president, a debt-proud developer who disparages taxes, is out there riling up his mob in rally after rally. He tells everyone who'll listen that the economy's never been better, and the mad media who listen to him keep listening and repeating with minor caveats. Not long after the financial crash of 2008 and the Great Recession that followed, I heard someone say, "It's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism." Is it? At the level of mainstream economics and theory, 10 years later, the supposedly smartest people in the land do retain their confidence in markets and privatization, debt, derivatives, and trickle-down growth at whatever the cost. But something has changed, and I remember sniffing a whiff of it first 10 years ago. In October 2008, the veteran radio journalist and oral historian Studs Terkel died, and along with him it seemed right then that an entire world was passing of productive, waged, hard but worth it work, the sort of work he documented in thousands of interviews for books like Working. Asked to MC Studs' memorial service in New York's Cooper Union, it was easy to feel grim, but as Howard Zinn reminded us that night, one of the dominant traits of Terkel was his incurable optimism. Knowing that to be true, I'd scattered about for news that might cheer us up, and I'd found some. In Terkel's hometown of Chicago, at that very moment, 24 laid-off workers were refusing to be fired. Sent home with no notice instead of leaving their jobs, the mostly black and Latino workers at the Republic Windows and Doors factory stayed put, and with support from their families and their union, they were demanding what they were owed, severance, their last pay, and an honest explanation for why the business was closing down. In the wake of the public's bailout of the banks, while some started seeing recovery in the works, others, like those workers in Chicago, started wondering about something different. Not a return to the rickety old, clearly careless system, but something else. Was there a more moral, more ethical, not to say more resilient way to run a business? Today, after much toil and trouble and help from their union and lots of others, those workers own their own business. New Era Windows is worker-owned and in the black. And that's what's changed. Instead of recovering, people have started to ask, what else? And they've started experimenting. And that's what the media were missing then and what they're missing now. But we're not. The Laura Flanders Show airs over the Pacifica Radio Network and other fine community radio stations. If it's not on the air where you live, please contact your local station and ask them to add it, or write to us and we'll help. That's Laura, L-A-U-R-A, at lauraflanders.org. In addition to helping others hear the show on the radio, subscribe to this podcast and receive my commentaries every week, plus extra mini-casts and much more. You can do all that at lauraflanders.org/listen. Next time, farming for change and food justice. That's coming up. The Laura Flanders Show is produced by yours truly, along with Tammy Warrenoff, Monica Mohapatra, Danica D'Souza, Charlotte Carpenter, Jeannie Hopper, and Dominic Marcello. Write to me. I'm always happy to hear from you. That's Laura, L-A-U-R-A, at lauraflanders.org, and I do my best to respond. Till the next time, stay strong, stay curious, and thanks for listening. I'm Laura Flanders.